For the if they are outstanding, but for the form itself, now she sent me a new form, all these.
Good morning, everyone. This is Hanunisha Hendrik speaking. I'm with Legal Aid South Africa, and I'm a member of Pillar 3. We'll just give people another few minutes to join. So we will start at 10:05 to give people just a few minutes to join, and then I will introduce the speaker and the topic for the day. So let's just give people a few minutes. Thank you. Good morning again, everyone. So it is 10:05 and we will start the session for today. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Hanonisha Hendricks. I'm with Legal Aid South Africa and I'm part of Pillar 3. Pillar 3 of the NSP Collaborative that is working towards implementing the strategic plan on GBVF in the country. And so today we bring you another webinar in our series of webinars, which started in July and is continuing in August. And today we have a particularly interesting topic that will be presented by Francesca Fonse. Now, Francesca is the national champion for women for DOJ. And so Francesca also has or founded an organization called WIN, a WIIN, and it stands for Women Integral Impact Network. So this is an organization that looks to empower women to overcome the challenges of GBV. So it seeks to achieve empowering, collaborating, and enriching the lives of women of South Africa. So it's quite a powerful organization in what it seeks to achieve, and it fits in so perfectly with what we want to achieve in terms of Pillar 3 and in the NSP Collaborative. Francesca has got personal experience that she will share with us, I'm sure, today. And the topic that she's going to talk about today is epigenetics and the environmental provocation with regards to teen perpetration of violence. And, you know, for me, epigenetics was a term that I did not know until a few years ago. And what I liked about it is that epigenetics try to challenge what we've always thought, meaning, you know, our genes, we get something through our genes, and that is what we are going to be, and that is how it's going to be. And what epigenetics meant for me or showed me is that that is not how it needs to be. You can change it. There are certain things that can be done to change it, and that can impact on whatever genes you have or you inherited, and then the outcome can be different. The product in the end can be different. What happens in the life of the person can be different than what people thought it should be because of the genes that they inherited. And that's what I love about the you know, the not the concept, but epigenetics, that it can be different. It doesn't have to be what people think it should be or what the genes say it should be. So over to you, Francesca. We're looking forward to an interesting session.
Good morning, Hanonisha. Good morning, friends and colleagues and guests. And today's topic is very close to my heart. What very few people know is that I have been a mystic scholar since I was 16. And to me, epigenetics is the mystic component of the biology of sciences. It tells us so much about our human behavior and how we can adjust it, that I think it is absolutely crucial to have this discussion. Today, I will discuss the environmental aspects, how it impacts us in terms of epigenetics. And on the 22nd, I will actually discuss how external and internal I mean emotional stimulus, can affect our biology and our chromosomal configuration. So that is another one to please look forward to. When it comes to epigenetics, everything is energy. And in a way, epigenetics, the field of epigenetics, explain to us the energetic impacts to the configuration of our genetic chromosomes. Luwanda, do you have my presentation?
No, I don't, ma'am. I was hoping that you would
I've
share.
emailed it to you, but okay. Let me see if I can. I'm just going to pull up my document so that I can share. Whilst I'm waiting for the document to upload, I want to talk to you about epigenetics. And some of my expressions today is personal. You don't have to like them, and you don't have to agree with them. But at the end of the session, I would like to do a very quick little exercise. So I'm going to ask everybody to get a pen and paper ready so that we can do that before we get to the questions and answer session, please. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, there we go. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, I'm going to put up slides. Let's talk about epigenetics and environmental stimulus, and then we can talk about how these matters impact the youth of today and why we see, from a judicial point of view, that the age of perpetrators in violent behavior, especially in terms of rape recently, is actually reducing. And we can start to take actions in our homes to reduce these environmental impacts. Now, looking at this, there was an address that I did last year in 2021 with regards to the UN Global Compact Gender Forum. And I'm talking to what I said then, is non-violent methodologies won't matter. In other words, we can change the laws, we can do so many things, but if they are not incorporated into our structures, our construct, our educational curricula, our daily lives, then the behavioral programming of the trauma that sits in the unconscious mind can't be changed so easily. And much of the environmental aspects that I'm talking about also allude to the content on media, whether it's social media, whether it's TikTok, whether it is a television program. There is a lot of stimulus that we need to be aware of. In 2018, I got UN Women involved in having Burger King, Jimmy Choo, and other of the great brands remove advertising from the international scene because it alluded to domestic violence. You cannot believe it, but it is true. So if you look at what we have found and the different wounds, and I'm talking specifically emotional, that affects our biology, then every one of our main organs is susceptible to impact from negative emotions. The little quote from us on the right is what we need to allude to. Yes, we all inherited genetics that are not favorable from our ancestors. We also inherit genetics that is extremely favorable from our ancestors. But we always have choice, and we can always learn how to choose better. So when we look at the complexities of human behavior, we have structural, ideological, institutional, economic exploitation, patriarchal violence, and judicial violence. Many women experience judicial violence. And all these various forms affect our energy system, how we feel, and our emotions is the most powerful aspect of the human experience. I think we all can agree to that. That can get aggravated and heightened by the poverty that complicates violence. And we get different forms of poverty. We get economic poverty, actual poverty. We get mental poverty and social poverty. And all of these factors alludes to the interconnectedness of gender-based violence and femicide. Sometimes our cultural traditions are harmful to the well-being of female members in culture. Patriarchy as a whole, all cultures have subscribed to patriarchy for eons, and it needs to be changed. When we look at teenagers, and especially the young male perpetrators, we have to look at their environments, and we have to understand that some of the violence, the unresolved subconscious trauma which came from emotional lack, possible economic lack, and mental positive stimulus, is now heightened very often through trauma modeling in the absence of fathers. Addictions in a family. There's one addict, but the whole family suffers. Growing up under violent conditions, whether it's emotional, physical, psychological, in the home environment, plays a massive role. Growing up without positive role models leads children to often model their experiences on characters in movies and on television. And as I explained in another webinar earlier this year, unless a child knows 007 is fiction to an extent, that person might believe that it is an environment where you can behave free of direct impact, where you can, access somebody else's personal data online, and not having the context, but growing up with a subconscious negative programming. Socioeconomic pressures plays a huge, huge role in a lot of the violence that is experienced in society today. And it has to get us to look at our discourses of our morality and what are our expectations and our values. As I said when I started, everything is energy. And when we look at how everything settles, we need to understand that we can unlock or destroy a child's potential through stimulus and creating negative emotional experiences, which leads to further negative emotional responses from that child. We need to look at various systems and modalities on how to master our own abilities and self-knowledge, and what can be done, and learn from places where it has been done. There are some schools that goes back to the 60s in training children the actual impact of bullying by role playing. There are schools that started, for instance, EFT in the New York district in the States, and how it's there, it's recorded fact, and it's scientifically proven how those modalities calm the students, and how children, then adults, anybody have these tools to actually assist them to govern their emotional state, which is the most important thing that we need to be able to control, because life will always change. There will always be circumstances that is violent in some way until humanity is actually found that it can be humane in its totality. But we need to understand that there are tools, and unless we, as the consciousness, and as the adults, and as the leaders, and in this case, the Department of Justice, bring systems into place with other first responders and other departments dealing with gender-based violence, and allowing our youth to access tools that could assist them, then, only then, will we see that we can change this cyclistic and generational violence that we experience around. So when we look at the triggers, the prejudices, and how GBV manifests, we look at social, religious, and the cultural construct. And with this, I must tell you, all philosophies on creation actually has reference to epigenetics. The only thing is, the term did not exist. In the Christian Bible, it refers to the sins of the fathers that is passed down. That's epigenetics. In Buddhism and Hinduism, the concept of karma. In other traditions, family that believe in family curses, cyclistic behaviors, it's all been there. It is just that we have decided that it's not fashionable to listen to spirit anymore. Science is finally catching up with the spiritual afflictions and their effects on our psychology. Justice, after all, is at the foundation of law, but it has been very open to interpretation until now. I believe the 3 amendments to the Gender-Based Violence Acts is going to lessen that open interpretation and assist women and victims of gender-based violence and femicide to get a more just result and the restoration after conflict. To be just in itself has its conceptual origin in spirit and is expressed in consciousness and consequentiality. Do we teach our children? I think very few parents have that concept of true, valuable, non-violent interaction with their children? Do you teach your child, if you throw a stone at a cat and your dog sees it, it might trigger the response in the dog? What's the consequences? If you face a dilemma, your friend is being bullied, or you are being bullied, do you tell? Do you seek assistance from the teacher? Are you scared to seek assistance because you're scared that the group that's bullying you will intensify the bullying, or the group that is bullying your friend will now bully you? But what is the ultimate consequence that we are looking for as a society? Do we have real conversations with our children? That is at the crux of the breakdown of society. And you know, I remember even when I grew up, a child did not question their parents. I think if they did, a lot of the conscription would not have happened in this country. I don't think a young man that was looking forward to his life and was coming out of university or still had to go to university, wanted to go and, you know, roll in the dust and shoot guns in another country or on a border or something. The actual choice was removed. And we need to look at our society today. Our children have a lot of choice, but they are not taught how to apply it. Therefore, they are responders. They are constant reactors with regards to the subconscious programming of their genetics and the environmental stimulus. It is like they have not been taught the tools to calm, to center, and to process, and to make better choices. So let's talk about the provocations, and we look at the environmental factors and the triggers that contribute and stimulate violent behavior. When we look at these triggers, I wonder how many people understand that prejudice in terms of race, ethnicity, religion is actually a form of violence. I don't think many people understand that and give it much thought. If you look at gender, for instance, it's the second block where it says sex refers to biological and psychological differences. That speaks mainly to gender. Now, there are gender non-conform people on this planet. And however you experience gender, your own biological identity, your own physiological identity can or may not lead to triggers and prejudice. I think, and I've got personal experience with this very closely, a child growing up not identifying 100% to these labels, how we want to label each other, of just being a girl and a boy, finds it very violent and very distressing growing up. And I would like to see humanity get to the point where we can look at a person and, yes, they might have the biology of a woman or a girl, but to just look at that person and to just recognize this is a human being in expression and allow them peaceful expression of themselves. Because how society values and allocates gender duties in terms of a girl washes the dishes and a boy can fix the car, mow the lawn, it led to a lot of division. And that division leads to a diversion and tension very often. Myself, I mean, I love to listen to the sound of engines, and because the way I grew up, and thank God I had parents who allowed you to experience whatever you wanted to experience, I like to listen to engines. And I think men find it very often surprising when they have a trouble with their car, and I say, you know, what's your alternator, or well, check your spark plugs, or whatsoever. They find it very surprising. But it doesn't make me a man. It just makes me a person who happened to identify as a female fully, but with an interest in so many things. And that is what many children are not allowed growing up. And then, you know, when we look at the gender diversity and the gender divide, we also look at gender rights. And one thing that annoys me terribly, and that I will activate for until I die, is equal pay. Women has been exploited for the last 100 years, especially after the World Wars, when they had to step into the roles of males, where they had to work in factories, but as soon as the men returned, they were discarded. But apart from that, in some way or another, women has been exploited, whether it's just sexually, whether it was in terms of pay, in any circumstance, by the patriarchy for eons. There's things in our history that's happened to women that is frankly quite disgusting. And we are here to deliberate these social divisions upon the sexes or the gender that is deeply embedded in our subconscious minds, that results in it influencing not only society, but ourselves personally, our relationships with our children, because we have this conceptual construct of the typical stereotypical male roles and female roles in the family, in terms of access to our economy, in terms of our voices in society. So if you look at these triggers, I want you to keep an open mind, and I want to really think about yourself. How do you interact with people daily? What mirrors your lack in the trigger of something that you find dislikable in another person? This happens on a playground at school. This happens in a work environment. It even happens in church. I was talking yesterday in the summit of yesterday with regards to how people go to church. They leave church and they've got their children around them and they start gossiping right there on the church ground. Sorry, it's a terrible negative behavior, and it leads to insecurity for your children. And that is a discussion for another time. So when we look at triggers, environmental, the psychological and this socioeconomic traumas that is embedded within us, that we pass on to our children, that lead to GBV manifestation. However, remember, we are here to explore the manifestation of epigenetic triggers. And we are here to also understand that we can change it. It doesn't have to remain that way. I've spoken and alluded a lot about the different forms of trauma, mental trauma, psychological trauma, behavioral trauma, suppressed trauma, internalized trauma, physical trauma. And when you take all these different forms of trauma into account, it can lead to what we call dissonance. Dissonance is a study that I'm very closely involved in at this time. And dissonance can mean you are disassociated with yourself, your understanding of who you are, which many kids experience. But dissonance, that form of dissonance also leads for you to perpetrate prejudice and negative behavior. Because if you are disconnected to the core of your own self, you are not going to be able to have empathy or association with others. You will always come from this spot of lack within yourself. That is why we say, you know, when we look at triggers, the environmental triggers outside of ourselves, they normally trigger us because we don't have self-control. We don't have self-worth. We don't have inner strength. We're not given the tools to deal with our stresses. And that is very often the challenge for many children in today's society. Childhood today is busier and busier and busier, and life has got more activities and demands and diversions than ever before. I grew up, we played in ponds and we chased bullfrogs after it rained, and it was wonderful. My children preschool already, they had preschool, they had aftercare, they had ballet, they had music. It's just all these activities, and it's wonderful because it developed them as children. But if parents don't understand that they need to have real conversations with their children and that they must, you know, interact and hear them, then it becomes a stress factor for your child. When my daughter told me she doesn't want to do ballet after 5 years anymore, I said, okay. But let me tell you something, not all parents will say, okay, oh, I've paid for you for 5 years for ballet and you're doing it so good and you're so great. And that poor child will end up continuing doing ballet or whatever. Even in my own life, when I had to go to university, my first choice was BCom Communications. My father refused because BCom Communications was only offered at WITS at that time, and WITS was a terrorist university in his prejudiced mind from what he was told. My father is not a South African, so that is the environment that has changed his mind of allowing his daughter to go to WITS. I had to go to UP, so it ended up being economics. That is a typical example of how external factors can change the life and alternate the course of a person. I still wish I could have studied communications to today. So please draw something on that. When we look at how to support and refocus challenged societies towards peace and consequential learning is the concept of to make a decision, to make a mature decision, an informed decision, to learn how to research your own feelings towards something. We so often want our children to think like us, where we should give our children information and encourage them to access more information so that they can decide how they feel from an informed perspective. It's not only the teacher, the parent, but there's a lot of information out there. We have the internet. We might as well focus our children to apply it positively rather than some of the things that they get involved in on the internet that would ultimately affect their biology negatively and their subconscious negatively, which makes them very easy to trigger when it comes to stresses and turning violent. A young child, let's talk about what happened during COVID. Excuse me, my nose is a bit itchy. During COVID, we were all confined to our home environments. Gender-based violence, and especially domestic violence, spiked terribly. And with it, the increase of incidents of young males of low age that committed sexual offenses. Why? When a person has got the ability to move, and especially young males, we all know the biology, that when a young male reaches puberty, his hormones are through the roof. Male hormones actually start decreasing after 21. But until that age, it's really through the roof. And here they're confined, don't have the best upbringing, financial poverty, emotional poverty, don't get taught how to deal with emotions and stress factors. Mental poverty, don't get taught, you know what, if you're bored, maybe read a book, or if you have to go online, go and look at interesting things with regards to life and the phenomena of life. It's all about, in Afrikaans, they've got this very beautiful saying, skop skiet 'n donder. It's just all this violent behavior in our television channels and various series. And I don't say a child should not watch something, for instance, on the FBI files, but they should not watch it without the guidance of an adult who is capable to teach a child to differentiate and to learn through what it is that they are seeing on that screen, and to process it in such a way that they will know how not to behave and how to behave. So when we as a society can implement a well-rounded, integrative approach to student wellness and focus on the mind, body, intellect connection, we will really be able to change the chains of generational violence. We can implement at our schools, at our learning institutions, empowerment tools. We can teach them techniques and strategies for reducing stress. We can do that in our corporate environment, assisting parents going home stressed and tired of the day, so that they are not that aggressive to their children and can actually be a positive parent role model. So there's many things that we can do. We can empower and motivate creative awareness. That is very important to a child. That goes back to foundation phase. And that is a problem, because I think that is where our South African education system maybe lacks the most. is at our foundation phase awareness. And I had this in a conversation in another summit where I asked, when parents get upset when the curriculum start teaching their children about sexual behavior, why? If that child does not have the information or access to that information, how will the child differentiate? I'm a 5-year-old little girl. I am being molested at home. How do I know it's wrong? How can I say something if somebody does not teach me the very basic concepts of right and wrong? So I'm one of those parents that believe if you want to be a responsible parent, support your child to have access to information. Because in an environment where a child, for instance, is abused, who's going to teach the child that it's wrong? The abuser. We can't do that. So all these things, when we look at behavioral conduct and the constructs of our pain as a society, as an individual, as nations, epigenetics explain a lot of that. In the conclusion, that generational trauma originated as personal violence. It is an absolute fact. It is either personal violence experienced in the home environment, bullying at school, or even at home among siblings, GBV-related traumas, and it all starts within the family context. There is a beautiful a quote from Steffi Wagner on your screen. Pain travels through family lines until someone is ready to heal it within themselves. By going through the agony of healing, you no longer pass the poison chalice onto the generations that follow. It's incredibly important and sacred work. Carl Jung said, when an inner situation is made conscious, it happens, is not made conscious, apologies, it happens outside as fate. What that means is, if a child is dealing with a situation, an emotional, mental, psychological stressor that they don't have an outlet for, it will become part of your energetic, vibrational environment within your body, within your energy system. It will alter your genetics, and it will pop up somewhere in your descendants, and people will say it's a family curse, it's fate. That's basically what family curses refer to, is the cyclical manifestation of behaviors within a family, and it all relates to a trauma that was never healed. Understanding the role of environmental stimulus, of parents, educators, peer pressure, and visual entertainment in the manifestation of GBV. Again, it talks to all the different traumas that children are subject to today. Most children experience some form of mental trauma. Most. Whether they're bullied, whether they feel inadequate because they have a learning disability. A personal friend of mine, going back, her child was really not treated well by the educator until we realized the child had a visual problem. He needed glasses, and the child's disruptive behavior in the classroom completely stopped the moment the child actually got his glasses. But for 3 years, this child was being treated as a naughty child, very negatively by educators. In the meantime, this child could not focus because his eyesight was the dilemma. But in the meantime, this child experienced mental trauma and psychological trauma, which led to behavioral issues, which led him to suppress trauma and not tell his mother some of the things that, was said to him in the class, which he then internalized, which he then had to take him to a psychologist for years to undo what has happened in a classroom, for God's sake. Is that who we are? No. And that is why this even alludes to the amendment in the GBV Act, where everybody is now accountable. Accountability is not an option. You must look at that recording of that summit. You are accountable. The Wisdom of the Shamans, that is an organization created by Paul Coelho and Ruiz, the guy who wrote the 4 Agreements. And this is one of their slides that I really love, that I found on Instagram earlier this week. And it says, if unresolved trauma can store itself in your muscles, your fascia, your organs, your cells, and the rest of your physical body, so can joy, gratitude, abundance, love, and peace. And that begs us the question, do we express joy, love, and peace? Do we, the educators, the lawmakers, the politicians, the external environment raising our children, do we express joy, gratitude, love, and peace? Do we transfer that to our children? Do we give them the tools to experience joy, love, gratitude, and peace? It starts with us. And unfortunately, the us very often is we, the women, the mothers of the world. A very interesting thing, I was recently involved in a summit with UCLA on the biology of trauma. I will allude to that in our summit on the 22nd. Which is very much about how trauma actually affects the physical body and how it enters in your chromosomal configuration, which is the very, very sciences of epigenetics. Today, we are talking more about the effects and how it manifests and how it gets triggered. And when we look at this quote from the Science Journal, learning how to breathe in accordance to your body's designed rhythmic patterns aid in overcoming a state of imbalance and attaining holistic restoration. People, this comes from the Science Journal. This does not come from another source. It is science. Science is now proving that consciousness is the best expression and how to attain that level of consciousness so that we can become a healthy society. It continues, the power of conscious breathing to improve both the mind and body. In other words, which naturally spill over into spiritual improvement, leading to improved clarity, unity, fellowship, and intimacy with creation and other people. If you love flowers, you cannot hurt another person. If you feel worthy of you and you have an understanding of your expression of yourself, you will not bully other people. We need to start understanding the interconnectedness that we must allude to if we want to break these connections of intergenerational trauma, of wars upon the planet. And you know what is very interesting is we, to a certain extent, in many areas and big cities in the world, has basically poisoned their drinking water with estrogen because of birth control pills and everything. And that is a choice that a woman must make. It's a right. But as a humane and a human condition, when we look at it, despite all the interventions, whichever it might be, we have not really controlled the population of humanity. And we need to really ask some deep questions why. So that is why I said at the beginning of this summit, this session, that to me, epigenetics explains so much of the human condition, because our soul, your energy, your focused existence ultimately speaks to your biology, and your biology speaks to your achievements. Actually, everything that we are is in balance. And epigenetics can explain to us how behavior, positive behavior, joy, peace, love, negative behavior, prejudices, malice, whatever you want to call it, actually harms us, because you might be angry at someone else and be very bitter, but that bitterness is living in you. You're going to pay the price for it, not the person you're angry at. Somebody's mic is on. Can you please close your mic? So we have to look at all these things. And ultimately, it talks again about the tools we have so that we can face life, deal with our stresses, improve our physical immunity, improve our mental immunity, improve our focus and the way we operate in the world. Now, the very interesting thing is that neuroscience, this is a different scientific field, but it is very interrelated to epigenetics, that the Neuroscience Journal has quoted Dr. Clausen on his take, this was 2021, by the way, on his take on hereditary diseases. And it says neuroscience has shown that thoughts and emotions are processed in the brain the same way as a physical threat. That is a fact. It refers to the amygdala, it refers to the vagus nervous system, it refers to all those things that we will address later. And it concluded that every degenerative disease has the same neuro response. In other words, in accordance to Dr. Clausen, cardiac disease, vascular disease, diabetes, obesity, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's are all inflammatory conditions. Inflammation happens because of trauma, whether it's a fear, whether it's an actual affliction, whether it is a verbal abuse, it is trauma. It causes inflammation in the body. And when we look at this and we understand the different environments young children grow up in today, then we can have an understanding for how they respond to some of the triggers in their environment. Yes, we should also train them and give them tools to choose better and not to act on impulse and triggers, because we are here. People get triggered, people have impulses, and we need to control that. We need to uproot generational trauma. We need to change it. We need to really make different choices. And that all goes back to tools that many people has laughed at and, discarded during the years, that is now proven that they are actually working. And Dr. Clausen continued, and he said that anxiety, bipolar depression, and schizophrenia are all rooted in inflammatory processes, that it's not psychological. My God, he's turned the whole world upside down. Anxiety is a result of a threat. Threat is the cause, whatever the threat may be, and we all experience threat differently. The threat creates a bodily response, which includes your immune system, and that sensation is generated by the adrenaline and the cortisol of these inflammatory cytokines and the sensation of anxiety. What it basically says is your body doesn't differentiate whether it is your fear of a snake that is all of a sudden in front of you, somebody hurting you, somebody verbally abusing you. Any form of threat is processed within your biology the same way, and it eventually settles in your subconscious. And if you are not capable of differentiating to the different forms of threat and how to deal with it, you will get stuck with trauma that is internalized in your system. So since the unconscious brain, remember we're talking about the unconscious brain, which many refer to as the subconscious, processes 20 million bits of information per second. The conscious brain only processes 40. We cannot negate the response of mind over matter. We have to look at the subconscious mind. We have to look at what some people call the higher mind or the spiritual mind. And we have to look at the process response in between. Thus, it is my resolve that education methods should incorporate strategies to reduce anxiety in learners. That is me. That's my resolve. And that is what this is about. These summits are in educating we, the adults, the lawmakers, the responders, on what triggers children, what trigger ourselves. If we don't look at what trigger us as adults, we cannot assist our children with their triggers. And we can only do that when we are honest with ourselves. There's a very famous doctor, Dr. Joseph Nicola. He's from Chicago. And he used certain methods to reduce mortality in COVID-19 patients, because in the beginning, people died of COVID-19. It was a pandemic, the world shut down, everybody lived in fear. So most of the initial COVID patients who lived in a fear paradigm died, because that is the paradigm of the subconscious mind. Wow, big pandemic, this is COVID-19, I'm going to die. And when we look at what Dr. Nicola said in terms of reducing inflammation in COVID-19 patients first before anything else, and had great success with it, then we also look at Dr. Bollinger from the Science Journal that wrote in July 2022, just a month ago, while we have already established so many ways in which conscious breathing holds powerful significance in human life, it is also play a major role in treating cancer, trauma, and inflammation. Again, inflammation is the original cause of cancer. Recognizing its ability to improve cellular oxygenation and metabolism, controlled breathing has the potential to dramatically alter the internal environment of the body in such a way as to make it unfavorable for the growth and survival of cancer cells. Dislodge trauma-based inflammation and calm the mind. This is not your normal breathing that these doctors allude to. This is focused breathing. This is the deep breathing that we experience when we meditate, when you are calm. For some people, prayer is a calming experience, and unbeknownst to them, whilst they pray in a calm fashion, they breathe deeper. For some people, like myself, I love to meditate. So just that 10 minutes a day, that connection to yourself, that connection to your environment, it's extremely calming. Meditation can also be just a walk in nature, but it needs a level of consciousness. In other words, letting go of external factors and just focus that consciousness internally. The interconnectedness between epigenetics, stimulus, and aggression. When we look at that, and you will look at the biological aspects and the threat aspect, and the threat aspect leading to inflammation, inflammation leading to disease, disease that becomes hereditary and genetically transferred. It also leads to that inflammation altering the chromosomal sequence and also quality of the human experience. So we really, what I'm trying to convey to you today is if we really want to be just, and we say we seek justice, we are in fact looking for a just expression of morality. As I said in the beginning, to be just in itself is a conception aspect of spirit. So I'm going to speak to you all, and I want you to get your paper and your pens ready. And I want to say to you, if we want our children to reach their potential and not to become perverts and not to perpetrate sexual offenses, crimes, not to take drugs, when we want to empower our children to be the best that they can be, it needs every aspect of adulthood. The parents, the teachers, the government, the systems of education. It really needs us all to contribute to children's learning experiences. You can contribute to your child's friends' learning experiences. It is just a way of being. We need to find new ways of being in this world. I think we've saw that very much during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's very important because a lot of people, the threat of COVID, the situation of not being able to be isolated, to be in a closed environment with themselves, not to be able to internalize, to externalize, and to purge trauma, saw an absolute rise not only in domestic violence, but also in some areas in femicide and also suicide. Suicide was very prevalent during COVID-19. And it's all about not knowing, not being able to express yourself, not understanding your own internal drives, not having the tools to cope. And I said there, we, the nation, needs to go out of our way to cease enabling the growth opportunities of the youth, as their future depend on it. Why? Because it does. Growth doesn't just happen. It doesn't happen for me unless I search something or engage in something or learn something. Not for you, not for anybody. We must educate our youth to heal and excel, and instill in them the tools to grow within, to heal and to change their world. A peaceful mind does not harbor violence. This is very true. The last slide's just some certifications I've done through the years, externally to and searching my experience. And funnily enough, these certifications, these endeavors now assist me greatly as the National Champion for Women and as the founder of WIN. And I'm so grateful that I just didn't stay stuck in my focused environment, my professional career, and that I explored other avenues of learning, and so, especially things that I never knew would become such a vast, integral part of my daily existence. So there's a quote there, and it never said where it comes from. It says, emotional pain is remembered more than physical pain and has more effect on your behavior. So epigenetics is a great field because it touches the actual physical sciences. It touches spiritual sciences and behavioral sciences. And when we look at this, we can actually see and determine that we should actually look at ways to educate our children at school, to new ways that we can move forward and we can make the best resolutions, and we can create the best systems, and we can create and teach the best tools to take our children forward and break this situation of violence. A lot of the stimulus that children experience, especially when it is one-parent households, is television. And we might as well implore the creators of content to create programs where these truths are revealed, and whether they do it in anime or cartoon or character, doesn't matter. But we have an opportunity to take a tool that very often impacts our children very negatively and apply it in a positive way. I'm now going to ask you all, I just need a sip of water, to get your paper ready, because I want to give you something that you can use today. And on your paper, I need you to draw 3 circles. Can you see the circles? It's 3 intersecting circles. No wonder, are you capable of seeing them?
If you can just back up a little bit, ma'am, but they are too close.
Too close?
Yes, but they're a bit blurry, but I'm pretty sure we can all make sense of what is there.
Okay, please draw those 3 circles. So intersecting, they look, okay, wait, I think it's the reflection. I just saw them, but like that.
Yeah, they are okay now. Yeah.
So if everybody draws this, I'm going to give you a tool that is really very relevant in your day-to-day lives. And if you deal with children and with the youth, please apply this. Thank you, Delia. Thank you. Absolutely, I agree with you. You know, prayer comes in many forms, and we should not apply prejudice to prayer and decide how people should pray. We should just be grateful for those who do. So if you look at this, there, in the top blue one here, the big piece of the blue one that's free, I want you to write mind and thoughts. Yeah? This area there, mind and thoughts. And then on the greater green, you don't have to have it green, write there focus and action. Sorry, it's the reflection of my paper. I'm trying. On the greater orange, I want you to write body or physiology. Right in the center, I want you to write there soul or morality. I'm trying, sorry guys. Then where the green and the blue intersect, that piece there, creativity. The orange and the green intersection, physical activity. And the orange and the blue intersection, contemplation, prayer, meditation. Now imagine these circles and their interactions represent you. It actually shows you that your soul, your morality, and your consciousness is an expression of all these other aspects of you. And if your expression is just and consequential, then you are a well-balanced person. Alternatively, unjust behavior like bias, violence, and prejudice separate you from that soul awareness, that consciousness. It creates that dissonance where you are disconnected from yourself, but where you're also disconnected from other persons. And I want you to think about this today. When we criticize our children, what do we achieve? When you continually and almost daily criticize your child, and I'm not saying a child can't be naughty or do something wrong or neglect something. Do you criticize his character or do you criticize the lack of action? Because if we keep on criticizing our children or neglecting our children the way we do, they stop loving themselves. And that is one of the biggest problems today is where a lot of people with a lot of hidden traumas and a lot of imbalances within ourselves. We don't see our own goodness, because very, very often we don't act our goodness because of these traumas. So we really need to start with ourselves in all aspects of life, whether it is injustice, whether it is with raising children, whether it is in education. You've now got this circle, and you can go and contemplate that interaction for yourself. Or you can ask me questions about it if you wish, because I'm going to open the questions in a moment. But if you can imagine your physical body as a cell phone, comes back to my statement, everything is energy. Your physical body is that hardware. It's that phone that you hold in your hands. Your mind is the frequency, the connectivity. Is your connectivity clear? Is your thought processes positive? Can you, this physical cell phone that you hold in your hand, can it work properly if the cell phone tower is down or the internet is down? What is your internet? What is your frequency? What is your connectivity? And the application of your cell phone falls into that focus area. Do you apply yourself with consciousness? Do you apply yourself with clarity? Can you teach your children through nonviolent behavior? Can you have the clarity to set your television so that children can't access adult content? All those things, everything in your life falls in the intersection of those three circles. And that is why I taught you those circles today. And anybody who wants to ask me a question is very welcome now, because I think through this session, it is very clear that our physical body, our physicality, our emotional self, which is linked to our thought, mind, heart space, and our focus, in other words, how positive we are, and are we looking for solutions and tools to overcome our traumas, actually is the consequence of who we are and how we express in life. And that ultimately affects our genetic patterning. It affects us whether we are contributed to a hereditary disease in our family line, whether we are contributing to a malformation in the genetic chromosomal configuration that would trouble and trip one of our descendants. And that is what I wanted to express to all of you today, and everybody watching this seminar in future. Thank you. Hanunisha, I'm handing back to you if there's any questions.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you for this thought-provoking session, the discussion. I found it most, how can I put it now, looking inwards and looking at, the triggers, even trying to look at what could I have experienced as triggers in my life, and also whether I am a trigger to someone else. So thank you for the session. I will definitely be looking at the presentation again and listening to it again, because sometimes I do feel that one pick up more and more as you re-listen to things. So in terms of questions, anybody can just raise their hands to ask the question. Otherwise, you can put a question on the chat if you are not able to put a question, to speak and unmute yourself. There are many comments on the chat, and I will go through them as well. I see Sheena Jonker. Hand is up. You can go ahead, Sheena. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just want to thank Francesca because this has been a very mind-blowing conversation for me. We work in restorative justice and transformative justice in sexual violence, domestic violence, and youth violence. And there was a book recently by Raul Martinez called Creating Freedom, which was equally mind-blowing, where he questions the concept of ultimate responsibility in the Western adversarial system. In other words, the person who's committed an offense is alone in a dock, and we seek out this this form of ultimate responsibility for crimes that's never ever going to transform the violence in our world, because it doesn't take into account biological and epigenetic factors that, some of which you've been talking about. And I just pulled out my criminal law textbook as well from varsity from 1994. And there's a report in it that beautifully describes the disintegration of the mind, body, and spirit that makes us unwell and incapable in this sense of proper legal capacity. And I'm always so amazed that this work hasn't been developed further. And so I just wanted to say to Francesca, I think you're one of the key missing ingredients in our sort of traveling towards a restorative, transformative world. Restorative justice is obviously making things right again. Transformative justice is saying there's institutions that are not in service to us, like criminal justice in its historical format, like civil justice in its historical format, which further dehumanizes individuals. And I think some of the so transformative justice is this idea that we can actually renew our institutions or recreate institutions that actually are in service to humanity. Restorative justice being the idea that we need to get at the causes of violence rather than trying to treat the symptoms of violence, often in very violent ways. And so I'm absolutely, I've heard of Francesca. I've never actually had direct insight into her work. And I just wanted to say that I'm absolutely blown away, and I'd love to get this video and the presentation for my trainees and panelists. I think it's so important, and I think she must be one of the most important voices for our time in the fight against gender-based violence or violence as a whole. So sorry, it's not a question, but I just wanted to express that.
Thank you, Sheena. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sheena. I cannot agree with you more, and your observations are very, very keen. And I'm very privileged to say that I'm working with one of my colleagues in the UK, and we will release a book sometime in the future on the 12 manifestations of violence, very much from an epigenetic and this holistic experience of addressing violence and realizing that a lot of the violence that is perpetrated today actually started in the past, in past aspects of violence from a global experience very often. and that we need to change those. So I thank you very, very much. Thank you. Anunisha, anybody else? I see there's
Yes.
other raised hands, but I can't identify them.
Yes, so there are more hands. Lebo, go ahead.
Good morning. I'm always so glad to be part of these webinars because they're so informative. And it's not specifically a question, but it is just highlighting the fact that through what Francesca has spoken about, through, like she said, the sins of the father are visited upon the son. And yesterday we touched on the fact that things like rape and violence have become a part of the tapestry of South Africa and even the world over. And it explains why things like femicide and gender-based violence are on the rise. And I feel it also highlights the fact that we need to start looking more deeply into healing. We often just ignore the fact and think that children, I often hear this, children are resilient and they get over things, and they're not. This is changing their DNA, as Francesca has said, and this is creating violent beings. Me, myself, I'm even, I'm feeling sick today after yesterday's session, and that just proves how much the work that we do influences who we are, and it changes how we feel in as deep down as a cellular matter. So I want to highlight that this is, I love what Francesca is saying. We've had various conversations upon this, but I think the powers that be need to realize that this is not going to end until we start a healing process as a country. Unfortunately, Nelson Mandela tried to put the Kumbaya Rainbow Nation, but nothing was done to heal the past pain. And I feel that now we are living the consequences of that neglect. Thank you.
Thank you, Lebo, for the comment. Francesca, you want to contribute, or can we move on to Delia?
Yes, I agree with that because, I was party to the TRC, but in camera, and I know there was such a lot that was said and so on, but expressing and healing, and especially if you are not given the directive and the correct tools to heal. Yes, telling stories is healing to an extent, but it very often leads to reliving that story every time you're telling it and not really healing. It's actually deepening the effects of what was experienced, unless and until we give women and children and men too the tools to unlock the subconscious traumas that they are experiencing. Let me tell you something. Men need to heal. Because as I said, when you are a balanced individual and when you are at peace with yourself, you don't hurt others. So collectively, doesn't matter your gender, your race, your ethnicity, your social standing, your economic standing. Humanity needs tools for healing. And it is through our continual biases, prejudices, our wars, our violent behavior that we are where we are today. So it is very, very important. And that is why I appeal, and every time I say it, that we involve media, we involve script writers to bring into the script that becomes, your daily soap or whatever it is, the consequentiality of what it is, what we do. Our consciousness is very important. I remember during the AIDS pandemic, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma appeared in a episode of a daily soap. I can't remember which one it was, But that one episode did more for the awareness of HIV and AIDS and the correct understanding of what is the difference between being HIV positive and what is the understanding of having AIDS than all the, government talk and declarations and the fights with President Mbeki and all the other things. And you know what? In the end, some of the things that people found very negative is correct too, but it wasn't the whole picture. If you want to deal with something that is out of balance, you must put the whole being back into balance. That is very important. And we can do that in the judicial system if we change the judicial system to be just again. And that is what Sheena alluded to, restorative justice. Thank you. Next question.
Delia Bernardi, you can go ahead.
Morning, colleagues. This is not so much a question, but rather a comment. I second what Sheena said, Francesca. This webinar has been mind-blowing. A powerful webinar, very important work towards the eradication of violence towards women and men and children. Herschel Gottfriedson said that the lack of self-control is a component of every single crime. In almost every negative behavioral pattern, there is a lack of empathy, which plays a major role. So one may ask, well, what is empathy? Well, the conscience or empathy, you can use the word conscience and empathy interrelated, is a function of our spirit and not of our mind, as many people think. So usually we will hear the saying, healthy body, healthy mind. Well, I say healthy spirit, healthy body and mind. So our predominant interventions like the Duluth model don't address trauma, lest it gives the perpetrator an excuse. And this is just such a tragedy because, as you said, Francesca, shame forms a part of much of the violence that we see today in our homes and communities. And shame thrives being unspoken. So yes, this has just, thank you so much for this webinar. Important work and definitely, I think, the ingredient towards progress.
Okay.
You are very, very welcome, Delia. You know what, and you talk about shame, and that is exactly why I thought I'd share these 3 circles with you. This has never seen the light before because this is the graphic that I designed that will go into the book addressing trauma and ultimately the resultant states of inflammation or states of trauma that leads to violence and to low self-esteem and all these things. Low self-esteem, people think a bully is a person that is strong. A bully is not a person that is strong. A bully is a person that secretly has an extremely low self-esteem. And it borders to allude to a form of narcissism, which of course can manifest because narcissism is people, they're normally sociopaths that are focused on systematically eradicating the person that they are targeting, their self-esteem and their sense of self over a period of time. So we really need to look at these things, and we really need to start teaching young people tools to deal with stresses. That is the start of it all. That is where you break that link, is those tools. And we can teach that in the legal environment. We can teach it to clerks of the court, how to take 10 minutes in their day to de-stress so that they are more efficient and they don't internalize all the stresses of their work environment, because when they go home, They've got their own personal stresses as well. We can teach this to attorneys so that the attorney's grasp of the client's trauma and the manifestation of it is better, and they can serve their clients more, but also protect themselves. So this is really the mind map, so to say. And mind, I'm just saying that because, you know, we need the thought process. But this is the map we need to start practicing as humanity in all areas of our lives. Because when you are an integrated human being, you don't destroy nature. When you are an integrated human being, you are of service to others. When you are an integrated human being, you strive for the positive in life. You don't contribute to the negativity. It is just what we all really strive and allude to become and to be, is what you can take this little graphic and put your behaviors in these various sections and create your own consciousness map, your own morality map, whatever you want to call it. This is an extremely important tool. And as I say, you know, when that book on the 12 manifestations of trauma comes through, it's a collaboration between myself and another lady in the UK. I will let you guys know. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. There's a question on the chat from Dinga. In fact, there's two questions. But the first one is, how, if we transmit our pain, how is it transferred to people around us?
Okay. The wonderful thing about subconscious trauma is that in every situation where somebody triggers you, in other words, where you see a person and you just don't like them, or you see a person and they speak, and jealousy, malice, any negative emotion that is triggered within you towards another human being is a mirror of the areas within yourself you need to work on. When you, and that is how this pain tells us stories. When you feel unworthy within yourself and you don't feel enough, you will, as in women, we call it the PhD syndrome, pull her down. You don't like it if another woman excels. If it's general in work, male or female, then, you know, you will have this resistance towards a colleague or a boss because something triggers you. It's your pain. But because you don't know how to self-assess and to manage it, you project it towards that person. We all do it at some stage in life. We all should work daily not to do that. And that is how it realizes. In a parent, I've seen it. I've seen it over and over again in my friends growing up, and I still see it today. Some parents don't, it's not openly there, but you get this impression some parents don't want their children to excel further than they could in their lives. And they don't even realize it. And therefore, it is a trauma in that parent through their circumstances of growing up, through maybe not having been able to have gone to university or something, that now is a secret resentment because they're not even fully aware of it because they haven't done the self-introspection. It's a secret resentment towards their child for having gone to university. And they probably enabled that child. We are complex beings. But the moment we understand that everything that triggers us, everything that makes us feel uncomfortable, talks to us and not the object of our discomfort, that's when we can start healing. What is the other question, Ananisha?
Thank you. And the other question is punitive justice assisting, helping victims to find healing?
Yes and no. You know, we can, for some people, it is enough. Remember, it is all about our own internalized processes. So for some people, it will be enough. For others, it will fall tremendously short. We really need to look, you know, at the broader picture. We really need to look at a holistic picture. And it is a self-responsibility. If you feel that you have not found the justice you were looking for, then you should, you know, try to verbalize, try to communicate, try to assess. Is it an internal aspect, an internal stressor, or is it really something that is falling short in terms of the greater humanity? So, yes, you know, there's various manifestations of justice, and especially in the legal justice system. There's various laws and acts and regulations, and not all of them is going to be the perfect fit for each human being's experience. We work in the justice environment at the best possible outcome, but it will never fit everybody. So for some it will be enough, and for some it won't be.
Thank you. There's, I don't know, Sheena, is it a new hand or an old hand? And Delia?
Sorry, I think it's an old hand with me. I'll take it down.
Okay, and then Miss Papa? Go ahead, Miss Tapa. You are still muted if you're talking. Or MS Tapa, maybe that is not Miss and it's initials. And Mr. Ra Moloto. Oh, you're still muted? Okay, maybe they've got challenges on their side. Francesca, I see that somebody called Advocate, where is that comment now? Advocate M.A. Mavotse had a question. I'm not sure if you covered Advocate because some of the presenters did speak about it, but I will still ask to put the question to Francesca. He or she says that, do you subscribe to the notion that we are body, soul, and emotions? And if so, where does spirit fit in?
Oh my goodness. You ask such a question to a mystic scholar. You know, I've written books and they were published in the US, and one of those books I was very, very privileged that actually made the New York Times list. And my second book last year was recommended by Amazon in terms of content. And it's really where we, you know, talk to these things. You are a physical body. Then that is your third dimensional construct. Your thoughts and your emotions, the unseen things that you sense, feel, and experience, that is in a fourth dimensional construct. Then what, from the mystic perspective, all your experiences, your consequentiality, including your traumas in a way, then is your consciousness, which encapsulates all this energy system that you are, the physical and the non-physical. And that is your soul. That is your awareness. And I definitely do believe that you have spirit too, but this spirit is not as predominant in your day-to-day life as it is in your practices of spirituality. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm not touching religion. I'm talking about spirit, that expressive, energetic force that comes from the Creator, whatever your Creator is for you. So that is how I believe, and that comes from my experience and my research. Spirit and soul is not the same thing. Spirit is pure, always will be. It's not an expression in this human experience. Your soul is the totality of your human experience, your consciousness. That's my belief. And I said from the start that my belief is personal, but if you look at the three circles that I taught you today, and you ponder it and you really investigate yourself, you should find your own answers. I'm not going to prescribe to anybody their answers. But if you ask me what I believe, I've just expressed it. Anybody else, Anisha?
Thank you, Francesca. It's just Ms. Tapa and Mr. Ramaloto. Are you able to unmute? You want to ask your question? Okay, it seems that they've got some challenges on their side. So that is the questions. Francesca, no further questions. There are comments on the chat, and the comments are appreciative of the session, the knowledge that they've gained, the conversation we've had. We are most appreciative of you sharing the circles with us so that we can start our own journeys and find the answers, as you said, for ourselves, or our answers that fits our lives through using these circles. So thank you for that. And like I said, when after you presented, I found this very thought-provoking for myself. And you know, in a day where we work, we go from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing, it was nice to have this, where you sort of you know, you sit back, you listen, and you think of this that can actually impact and everything you do. This going from the next to the next to the next impacts on everything you do, but it is for you. You know, it's going to be positive, something for you. You working on yourself and something for yourself, and I like that. That one could find time to do that. So thank you for this session. Thank you, Pillar 3, for bringing this, and I think we will make a suggestion that we must definitely have another one of these types of things going forward, because others would definitely find it as useful as I have. So if there's no other questions,
I would just like to conclude, if I may, Hanunisha. This concept of these circles and the application, and when you've gone through it for yourself, it is so simple to teach children. This is something that I would like to see taught in our education systems. I mean, I'm quite sure feeling balanced and feeling appreciated would be so much more appealing to anybody than being a bully or miserable or violence, because peace comes naturally to a human being. A baby is not born violent. It's born maybe with generational triggers, but it's not born violent. It's got to be triggered to be violent. And it's a succession of environmental factors through its lifetime that triggers the violence that is latent within when you look at epigenetics. And what is wonderful about epigenetics is it proves to us that we can change. internalized trauma. It proves to us that we can break generational trauma. It proves to us that once we find our call, our soul, whatever you want to call it, that you can heal. And the healing journey is not easy. It's no secret. I've experienced political violence in South Africa during the apartheid era. I've had very personal loss of my husband and my son. And I have experienced domestic violence as interrelational between siblings, as in a marriage. So I know it's not easy to heal our triggers and our traumas, but you've got a tool. And another thing that I do is when I wake up in the morning is the first thing I say thank you, and the second thing is I will stay focused and I will stay calm and I will stay positive through this day. And you know, I deal with violent situations and other people's trauma every day. And that is how I cope. And, you know, coping is also not easy. Some days you cope better than others. And that is the thing that we must teach our children. That is where the circle can help, this graphic. Because not every day is not the same. Some days you're going to be, you know, challenged more than other days. And we need to change that unrealistic expectations of children. You can be happy even if life throws challenges at you. You can be happy if you're not married. This stereotyping, this boxing, this labels, get rid of it. We are human beings. We must start there. And ultimately, you focus better, you achieve better, you are just better for society and for yourself in the long run if you are in touch with the core of who you are. And that is how I would like to end my contribution today, and to remind everybody here that on the 22nd, we are dealing with the biological impacts of trauma, which is the next field of epigenetics and triggers that I want to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and that concludes the webinar today. Look out for further webinars advertised by Pillar 3, and especially looking forward to the 22nd then, for the second in this series. Thanks, Francesca. Have a good day, everyone.
You are absolutely welcome. Thank you for attending. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye. Thank you.